Welcome to Revenge with Lyra.
Get out. Paying bills doesn't make you family. My dad snapped across the Thanksgiving table. The knife clinked against my plate. Mom leaned in, whispering like poison. You're just jealous of your brother. I smiled, steady and sharp. Then let him pay the $9,600. The room froze. Forks hovered midair. My brother's smirk faltered, and my father's face flushed crimson. That night, while the house slept, I shut everything down. By morning, it wasn't just a quiet storm. It was cops. Tears. Chaos. My name is Natalie Cross. And if you think this is just another family feud, you don't know how far blood can cut. Because what happens when the very backbone of a family, the one who paid their debts, kept the lights on, carried their secrets, finally drops the weight? The night replayed in fragments. Dad slamming his fist into the table. Mom's dismissive eyes. My brother looking smug, knowing I'd clean up his mess, like always. But this time, I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't beg for respect. I simply stood, cleared my plate, and excused myself like nothing had shattered inside me. Then I went home, pulled out my laptop, and started typing. Account after account, bill after bill, the endless auto payments tied to my name, my credit, my sacrifice. Mortgage? Mine. Utilities? Mine. Car insurance? Mine. Even my brother's student loans, under my signature. One by one, I canceled, logged out, revoked. At 2 a.m., the lights went out in their house. At 3 a.m., the car insurance lapsed. By sunrise, the bank accounts froze. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, watching the digital empire of obligations collapse in real time. And at 8 a.m., the first call came. Mom, frantic. Natalie. There are cops at the door. They're saying the mortgage is in default. The car's being repossessed. What did you do? I held the phone to my ear, listening to the panic I had carried for them for years. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The morning unraveled like a slow-motion disaster. By 9 a.m., 3 squad cars idled in front of my parents' house. Not for crime, for collections. When a bank files charges for fraud and missed payments, it doesn't knock politely. It arrives with badges. I watched from across the street in my parked car, hidden behind tinted windows. My brother stumbled out first, barefoot, hair wild, yelling at the officers. This is a mistake. My dad pays these bills. Except he didn't. I did. Then Dad stormed onto the porch, his voice booming. Ask my daughter. She's been handling the accounts. One officer flipped a clipboard. Sir, the accounts were all under Natalie Cross. She shut them down last night. I saw his face blanch from crimson to chalk. Mom clutched her robe tighter, voice trembling. She wouldn't do this. She's family. The officer's words cut her off. Ma'am, family or not, your payments are months behind. Vehicles, property, all repossessable assets are being processed today. Tears welled in her eyes. My brother kicked the porch rail, snapping. She's jealous. She always hated me. I almost laughed. Jealous? Of debt? Of the endless nights bailing them out while they spit in my face. I stayed quiet in my car, engine off, sipping coffee as their empire of entitlement crumbled in broad daylight. Dad tried one last swing of control. Natalie will fix this. She always does. But the officer shook his head. Not anymore, sir. She already signed termination orders. She's done. Those words hit harder than I ever could. Because they weren't mine. They came from authority, from law, from the world outside our toxic little circle. I let the scene play out until Mom sank to the porch steps, sobbing into her hands, my brother pacing like a caged animal, and Dad silent for once in his life. Then I drove away, unnoticed, leaving them the ruins of the house they swore I didn't belong to. For the first time, the burden wasn't mine. And this was only the beginning. Because once word spread through town, their precious reputation would collapse faster than their credit ever did. By noon, the phones were already ringing. At work, Dad's secretary posted on Facebook. Prayers for the Cross family. going through financial troubles. Within an hour, the whispers started. At church, at the diner, at the bank where Dad strutted like a king. Everyone finally knew. Meanwhile, my brother blew up my phone. 37 missed calls. A barrage of texts. You're sick. Fix this now. Do you realize how bad you've ruined us? I let them sit unread, the screen lighting up like fireworks I no longer cared to watch. That afternoon, I received a letter from the bank confirming the transfers had cleared. Every dollar I had secretly funneled from my own savings into their debts over the years had been unlinked. My accounts were clean, untouchable. For once, their chaos wasn't clawing into my paycheck. By 3 p.m., Dad finally called. His voice cracked, not with rage, but something colder. Fear. Natalie, listen. You made your point. Now turn it back on before the house goes under. I closed my eyes, remembering his words across the Thanksgiving table. Paying bills doesn't make you family. And I smiled. Exactly, Dad. That's why they're not mine anymore. His breath hitched. You'll regret this. You need us. But I hung up before he could finish. That night, a cousin sent me a video. It showed Dad on the porch again, arguing with the officers as the family SUV was towed away. Neighbors gathered on lawns, some shaking their heads, some recording on their phones. My mother hid her face. My brother screamed at the tow truck driver, his voice breaking. The caption beneath the video read, "Guess who wasn't so perfect after all?" I watched it twice, not out of cruelty, but clarity, because for years, they thrived on my silence, feeding on my sacrifices while calling me less. Now the silence was gone, and the world was finally watching. The real collapse wasn't financial. It was the unraveling of their mask. By the next morning, the fallout had spread like wildfire. At the cafe downtown, 2 women whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. The Cross family? I heard their daughter was the one actually paying everything. At church, no one sat in their pew. Eyes trailed them as they walked in. My brothers had bowed, Mom clutching her Bible like a shield, Dad trying to force his old confident stride. But the respect was gone, because respect built on lies collapses faster than a house of cards. Meanwhile, my inbox filled with messages from relatives who never once asked how I was doing. Natalie, is it true? We had no idea you were supporting them. Your father's been bragging for years. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The truth was finally speaking for itself. By noon, my brother showed up at my apartment, pounding the door so hard the frame rattled. Open up, Natalie. You ruined everything. I didn't. Instead, I filmed a scene from my window as he shouted threats in the hallway. Moments later, the landlord appeared, telling him to leave before the police were called. The video went straight online. That evening, the clip made its way through town. My brother, the golden child, red-faced and raging outside my door. The comments piled up. So much for the favorite son. No wonder she cut them off. And my family's carefully polished image cracked further. At home, I lit a candle, poured tea, and sat in silence. The peace felt foreign. No buzzing phone with urgent payment reminders, no panic about whose bill I'd cover next. Just stillness. But underneath, a quiet strength stirred. This wasn't just about shutting off the money. It was about shutting down the illusion. They wanted to erase me, to belittle me, to make me feel like my worth was conditional. Now the entire town could see who I truly was and who they had always been. And soon, the collapse would move beyond whispers. Because the bank had scheduled the foreclosure notice for Friday. And everyone would see it nailed to their front door. Friday arrived like a storm cloud everyone saw coming. Neighbors lingered on lawns, pretending to water plants or check mail. Cars slowed as they passed. By 10 a.m., the bank's white sedan pulled into the driveway. 2 men in suits stepped out, clipboards in hand, and walked to the porch with quiet authority. Mom opened the door, face streaked with tears. Dad followed, chest puffed, trying to argue. But the men didn't flinch. They handed him papers, then taped a bright orange foreclosure notice to the front door. Property seized. Vacate immediately. Gasps echoed across the street. Someone snapped a photo. Within minutes, it was posted online. The Cross House foreclosed. I sat in my car 2 blocks away, watching through the windshield. Not with glee, but with a kind of still relief. Years of sacrifice had held that house together. And now, without me, it crumbled in a single morning. My brother stormed out onto the lawn, yelling at the bank reps. "This is her fault. My sister sabotaged us." One of the men looked at him coolly. "Sir, your accounts have been delinquent for months. Your sister didn't sabotage you. She just stopped saving you." The words spread through the crowd like sparks on dry grass. Dad's face turned ashen. Mom buried her face in her hands. My brother cursed, pacing in the yard, but no one pitied them anymore. By noon, the video of the notice being posted had gone viral in town. The comments cut sharper than I ever could. Now we know who the real backbone was. Imagine calling your daughter useless while living off her paycheck. I drove away quietly, the orange notice burning in my mind. This wasn't revenge in the way they expected. No screaming, no fights, no slammed doors. Just silence. Just truth. And truth is heavier than any weapon. Because while they scrambled in chaos, I was already free, and the community that once swallowed their lies was finally seeing them for who they really were. But one final chapter remained. The Thanksgiving dinner table had been their stage of power. And I would make sure, next year, it became their stage of reckoning. Thanksgiving was always their performance. The big table, the polished silver, Dad carving the turkey while Mom reminded everyone how perfect the Cross family was. But this year, the house stood empty, foreclosure notice still taped to the door, curtains drawn. Their kingdom was gone. The holiday dinner shifted to my aunt's house, a smaller dining room, fewer chairs. Still, the family gathered, whispers buzzing even before the food was served. I walked in last. Heads turned. For the first time, people didn't see me as the quiet daughter in the corner. They saw me as the one who had shattered the illusion. My aunt hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you, Natalie. You finally stood up." At the table, Dad sat stiff, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot. Mom clung to her wine glass like it was oxygen. My brother avoided eye contact altogether. The meal began with strained silence, broken only by the clink of silverware. Then my cousin cleared her throat. "So, Natalie, is it true? You paid everything for years." Every eye shifted to me. I set my fork down, steady. "Yes. I paid the mortgage, the cars, the utilities, even his student loans." I nodded toward my brother, who flinched. And when I finally stopped, the truth came out. Gasps circled the table. My father's fists tightened on the edge of his plate. "We didn't ask you to announce our private business." I cut him off, calm but sharp. "You made it public when you called me useless at this very table." The room froze. For the first time, no one rushed to defend him. Not Mom. Not my brother. Not anyone. My aunt spoke instead, voice firm. "Useless? The only useless thing was the pride that kept you from admitting she saved you." Dad's face collapsed, the weight of his disgrace pressing him silent. I picked up my fork again, my appetite surprisingly steady. Because for years, this table was where I had been diminished. Tonight, it was where the truth stood tall. And though the turkey grew cold, the silence it left behind was the warmest thing I'd ever tasted. After dinner, I stepped outside for air. The autumn wind bit my cheeks, crisp and sharp, but it felt like freedom. Behind me, voices rose inside the house. Cousins, aunts, uncles circling around my parents and brother, asking questions they couldn't answer. Years of secrets unraveling all at once. I leaned against the porch rail, watching the leaves scatter across the driveway. For so long, I had imagined revenge as fire, as shouting, as one final eruption. But this was quieter, more complete. My father stepped out a few minutes later. His shoulders sagged, the weight of shame bending him smaller than I had ever seen him. He didn't meet my eyes. "You've embarrassed us," he muttered. I turned my head slowly, my voice steady. "No, Dad. I exposed you. You embarrassed yourselves. He flinched like the words cut deeper than anything I had said before. For once, he had no comeback, no booming voice to drown me out. He walked back inside, without another word. The door closed, muffling the arguments still simmering inside. I stood there a long time, realizing something. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't even need their presence. The power I had searched for all my life wasn't theirs to give. It had been mine all along, hidden under the weight of their bills and their insults. And now that weight was gone. That night, as I drove home under a sky scattered with stars, I passed the empty shell of our old house. The foreclosure notice fluttered in the cold wind, catching the headlights of passing cars. For years, that house had symbolized their control. Now it was nothing but paper, silence, and shadows. And in that emptiness, I saw the ending forming, clear as glass. Not their collapse, mine. The collapse of the girl they called useless. And the rise of the woman who finally proved them wrong. A month later, I hosted my own dinner. Not grand, not polished, just a rented hall with folding tables, mismatched chairs, and food carried in warm trays by neighbors and friends. People I had met through work, through community projects, through the life I had quietly built while my family pretended I didn't exist. The room buzzed with laughter and warmth, a chorus of voices woven together without pretense. When it was time, I stood and tapped my glass. The chatter softened. For years, I thought family meant blood. That's what I was told. But blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Sometimes, family is the people who sit beside you because they choose to, not because they have to. Applause rippled, soft at first, then growing. Faces smiled back at me, not out of obligation, but out of choice. Across town, my parents and brother ate alone in a rented apartment, lights dimmed, reputation in ashes. The calls had stopped coming. The sympathy had dried up. They lived in the silence they had once forced on me. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to, because my revenge was already complete. Not through their downfall, but through my rise. The girl they called useless had built something they never could, a life filled with chosen family, respect earned through truth, and peace unshaken by shame. As I looked around the room, I realized something even deeper. Forgiveness wasn't necessary. Closure wasn't theirs to give me. It had always been mine to claim. I raised my glass, steady and sure. To real family, I said. The kind that never lets you carry the world alone. The toast rang through the hall, louder and truer than any insult ever hurled my way. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight. I was standing tall in my own light.